you started working on coronaviruses long before they changed the world. How did that begin?
So I've always been interested in microbiology, and I wanted to study viruses because I think I find it very fascinating. It just so happened when I chose a lab for my PhD, at that time in 2005, SARS coronavirus had just come, and it was the most fashionable virus to study. And it had a lot of funding, and I chose that by sheer chance.
Okay. And what has been one of the most surprising aspects of clinical diagnostics since you entered the profession?
Most doctors base their diagnosis and treatment plan based on our reports, and they trust that it's reliable and accurate. But the entry barrier to actually start a clinical diagnostics lab is extremely low. You can start it with very minimal education, or you can start it with lots of education and lots of training. So the competing field is very vast and varied.
A career as a virologist is hectic but interesting. Our guest today, Dr. Pavithra Venkatagopalan, is a microbiologist by training and a lab director by profession. She did her PhD in molecular biology from Arizona State University, where she studied and published coronavirus papers long before the pandemic began, way back from 2007 and 8 onwards. So, when the pandemic began in 2020, she was able to provide reliable information to media and therefore the public to handle the panic from the spread of COVID. She founded Care Alliance Private Limited to establish Care Health, a state of the art clinical diagnostic center in Krompet, Chennai, to provide reliable and affordable clinical diagnostics. What has her career journey taught her, and what were her motivations? My name is Venugopal. I head Ideascape, a company into branding, communication, and advertising. And each week, we talk to someone who's had a wonderful career journey in a completely new field. So let me bring Dr. Pavithra on. Dr. Pavithra, wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you, Venu, for inviting me on this. It's an honor to be here.
Wonderful. So most people tend to play with, conventional careers and aspirations. What was it that defined your interests early on?
I've always liked biology. I was the kid that would squash a mosquito and see it under the microscope. Uh, and I had the access and privilege to do so. And when you're from a traditional conservative family, the options are, if you like biology, it's medicine. My mother is a doctor, and she was very clear that I should not study medicine because of various negative experiences that she had. So she gently urged me towards getting into research. And I still remember the book that my parents got me from Landmark, which no longer exists, called Microbes. I still have it. I remember being fascinated by that, being pulled into that world, and every step I took was in that direction. So it was no surprise to anybody or to me that I would venture into this field to start studying.
Okay. And were there any other options? Did you consider looking at anything else, or it was almost as if it was a single-minded focus in that area?
Studying biotechnology was a single-minded focus. I didn't think about anything else. The idea of the genetic material, DNA and RNA, still gets me excited, like a toddler would with candy. I get excited about the latest uh, developments in the current technology. And as you can tell, I'm a nerd, very happily talking about microbiology all day long. And I didn't think about venturing into other areas because one, I had the privilege of being able to choose. There was no pressure from the family to do one thing or the other. And two, the field of biotechnology had just come and it had only been a few years old and people didn't know about it. You could get into the college a little bit easier. And that's just how I chose and came in this direction.
So, how was the course at Anna University? If it was a recent course, it's obvious that everybody was coming to terms with it. So, do you think it helped? What were the kind of things that worked for you and didn't work for you?
So the biotech department in Anna University was founded and run by people who had training abroad, which means this might land me in a bit of a soup, but we are, as such, our traditional education teaches us to be very good followers. Independent thinking is almost discouraged, even though now things
Discouraged.
are
Yes.
changing. Uh,
Yeah.
so we initially, all of us that got in were very good at scoring marks, and we were all very good at. Others you wouldn't get in. But going there, we had professors who would be like, "So what do you think happens?" And we had no idea how to answer that. And that way, and our department was slightly because of the people had training elsewhere and they had come. The teaching methods were very different, and that helped us think about situations and problem solving in a very different way. I don't know if the department is still run that way. I've not gone recently, but we had some of the pioneers who started the department and ran it in a way that almost landed us in trouble with the other departments because we were not as obedient. We would question the professors from other departments, not out of not because we were being bratty, but because we were allowed to question in our departments,
Yeah.
and it was an interesting journey.
Okay. Any incident from college which kind of stays in mind, or it was fairly smooth sailing?
Our college was fairly smooth sailing. Honestly, I mean, in the usual college friendships and all of that. I met my husband there, and so I suppose that is a milestone event that I should note here. So, other
I
than
like
that,
the way you I like the way you put it. Okay. So how did
other
as soon
than
as
that single event, it was a very
okay.
smooth sailing process.
Okay.
And because we had people who were trained abroad, again, they had contacts with people who had excellent networks. So
Okay.
we could reach out to scientists in India that are doing good work to get to intern with them. So those were opportunities that were, because the department was so new and so small, we lucked out in terms of competition. There were only so many slots. There were only 40 of us. So we all were able to access these uh, previously closed out circles when we were so much more younger.
So this whole idea of working with viruses and potentially lethal what do you say, organisms, that was never a source of fear, or it was never a kind of, somewhere because you hear all these stories and all these Western, thrillers are about bacteria or viruses which have escaped from research labs and stuff like that. I'm sure you take, there's a whole set of precautions, but as a person getting into it, what was your take?
That's a very interesting question. I've never thought about it that way. So before I started working with coronaviruses, one of the viruses that I had to work with was HIV. And this is a few years back, and there was when I would talk to my family about working with HIV, they would say HIV le edukku work pandra. Sorry, I'm speaking in Tamil. I'm just saying
Yeah,
what
yeah,
my family
that's fine.
said. I said it's a virus. The virus doesn't understand our stigma, and we know that this is how the virus is transmitted. As long as I follow the protocol that needs to be followed, I'm safe. And yes, Robert Cook was one of the biggest influences of my life in wanting to study medically infectious pathogens. Uh,
Yeah.
so they are very thrilling, and a lot of this have actually almost influenced how we reacted to the pandemic also. But we can talk about that maybe a little bit later. No, there was no fear of working with these because the mindset to work with in a lab, you have to have that diligence, you have to be willing to follow protocols, not take the shortcuts, and that will keep you safe. you and your co-workers, we had to share a lab space with somebody that worked on a cousin of the smallpox virus. If they were not being safe, I would get infected with that. And if I was not being safe, they would get infected with it. So all these protocols are being followed. And when you work with very, very select agents, is what they're called. Select agents are the agents, pathogenic agents that can cause uh, death or a significant event. The buildings are designed such that these pathogens cannot escape those spaces. So they're not handed to everybody to work with also. The people that give you training know whether you're capable of handling it safely or not as well. So while I did have a lot of fear, people around me, I suppose, had some amount of fear, but not much. They didn't share much with me, I guess.
So does it get to be a kind of second nature? Because like you said, this almost becomes, so do you have to be a very methodical, process-oriented person in order to be in clinical diagnostics? Is that part of the requirement?
This is a question that if you're not in the creative field, I believe that if you're methodical and process oriented, you will still you are almost set up for a good level of success. And especially so in clinical diagnostics, because you have to be accurate and you have to be reliable, and you don't get that by doing things haphazardly.
Right, absolutely. That's so true. So give me a sense of what does it mean to work on a virus and to figure out where an intervention is possible, or how do you stop it in its tracks? What are the things that you investigate?
So these are two. So as a clinical diagnostician, I do nothing with viruses.
Right.
As a researcher, I work with the viruses. That has been well established. So we know how this virus enters the cell, how it affects the immune system, and how to stop it, and all of that. So, in that sense, to answer your question, these have already been well established in the viruses that I have studied and I have experience with. There are people that go to different places and collect samples and don't know what they work with, because they might identify new pathogens, they might identify new viruses, and that's a very important work, but that's never something that I have done. So I knew how the infection would start, how it can be stopped, how you can prevent the infection. If it has to be stopped, then you're a bad researcher. It has to be prevented with the protocols that are already in place to keep you safe.
So basically, your main focus is detection, the presence of the virus or the bacterium in a certain setup, the tests which are there. Those are the
Yeah,
things that you focus on? Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. So you've written several papers while you were at Arizona State University. So
yeah.
what were the aspects that you handled? What were, if you can give us a flavor of some of the papers, and what were your interests?
Okay. So when we work with viruses, there is always, almost always, an animal model virus that is safer to work with.
Okay.
So this coronavirus is a large family of viruses that affects a whole lot of animals. In fact, it's very, very significant in for people that have hatcheries and cattle, because or these viruses can actually kill off an entire hatchery within like a span of a
Okay.
week. So that particular strain will not affect us humans. These viruses can affect mice, and that will not affect humans. So most of the research, the basic research, is done on these model viruses. So you grow the viruses in cells inside the lab, and then you make changes in that virus to see which part of this virus can stop it in its tracks, or how does this virus adapt to changes. And these are very typical models of how you can study the virus. So you actually go in and modify the genetics of that virus to see whether it will survive or not. Most of the time, it will not survive. If it survives, you see how it has adapted. So this is the research aspect of it. And when we studied this, I studied a particular protein on that virus and how modifying that affects the virus's life cycle. It's a
Okay.
small protein that I studied called the envelope protein, E protein. We pronounce envelope, but in the US they pronounce it envelope. And how this tiny, tiny protein, if you remove it from the virus will still survive. But having that protein in that virus will actually cause it to grow much faster, grow much more efficiently. So those were,
Okay.
and my job was to find out why this particular protein was needed for that.
Okay. So, having studied at Arizona, what were the career options that you considered while in the US, and what did you finally decide upon when you came back to India?
So this is where a little bit of may not it is not professional, but it is real life. So when you do a PhD, your relationship with your mentor is very personal, and it's a single one-on-one relationship. Unfortunately, my mentor and I did not have the greatest of relationships for various reasons. Some of it I will take ownership to. Some of it maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. I'm not sure. Uh, and there was a point where I knew I could not get a letter of reference from her. So I had to consider other options to see what I wanted to do. So when you have a PhD, I could have fought her and taken letters of reference from other people, from my committee and all of that to get to do a postdoctoral research. But at that point, I think I was so exhausted, with mentally exhausted with trying to fight for my degree and get it and all of that. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And at that point, this is going to be very strange. I moved back to India, where my parents have always been extremely supportive. I moved back to India, and I went off on a trek. I was learning to play the cello as a hobby, and I know this is going to sound very strange. I went off on a trek for a month to Arunachal Pradesh. Nobody could hear from me. I lived in the mountains for about a month. And finally, I get a call from my dad and my husband of 1 year, saying, "Are you coming back?" I said, "Yes, I will come back. And I'm not sure what I want to do." And I was telling my dad, "You know what? I don't want to do anything responsible. I want to play the cello on Marina Beach and beg for money." And this is an actual conversation with the family intervention saying, "What are you doing?" So my dad said, "You play the cello, but please don't beg for money. We'll sort of take care of things." So they let me be for about 6 months. And then, you can only be put down for so long. Your own intellect starts functioning. And I wanted to work as an infection control person in a hospital setup. Usually nurses do this. The senior most nurses do this. And I was exploring what it would be like. And I worked in one of the major hospitals in the city for a while. And uh, having too many microbiologists, clinicians and non-clinicians was not particularly welcome. So we were figuring out, okay, what else can we do? And my husband at this point was a faculty at Shastra University in Tanjore. And we said, okay, am I moving to Tanjore or not? And all that. And at this point, my husband's a biochemist. I'm a microbiologist. And living in Tanjore wasn't really something that we enjoyed doing. And we said, okay, let's see what we can do. And that's when some of the diagnostic labs were giving out franchises. So we said, okay, why don't we take a diagnostic lab, of franchise of a diagnostic lab, and run? And then the more we explored it, we were just not using our capabilities for anything intellectual. So we said, okay, between you and I, we've got this. You're the biochemist. You can run the biochemistry test. I'm the microbiologist. I've got the microbiology setup. So let's start a lab. And that is how it came to starting Care Health Diagnostics in 2015. 2014 and 2015 we started.
Fascinating origin story. Let me just do a summary. I'm
Sure.
speaking to Dr. Pavithra Venkatagopalan, and she spoke about how she was interested in biology right from her childhood. And then she had the option of either looking at medicine or pursuing biology. And I think that is a particularly interesting anecdote where she said even when she squashed a mosquito, she would look at it under a microscope. And she spoke about her time at Gindi, her degree, and then at Arizona. And she's been remarkably frank about what her course in Arizona was like, what she learned, the problems that she had, and the decision to come back to India, which I think is one of the things that a lot of people tend to have at various points in their life when a crisis happens is not clear. But it's amazing how she bounced back, and the fact that she plays the cello and use that as one of the ways of getting back is amazing. So now we'll talk about how the setting up of the lab happened, what does it involve, and what are the various things that you have to do in order to get it going. So, Dr. Pavitra, what was the initial years like of setting up this place?
I, the initial years of setting up this place takes me back to when you do your due diligence, you know what tests you want to do. So for running a diagnostic lab, you need somebody who can draw blood. Neither Kaushik nor I can draw blood. So we needed to find somebody who could draw blood. And that was remarkably easy because we worked with a lot of people, and then we figured out how to draw blood. We got the people to start drawing the blood. And then now the technology is so good for analyzing blood that machines and machine vendors are available. So we did a good bit of due diligence and chose the equipment that we wanted to buy for the lab. And we opened up the lab, and the building still wasn't done. We just sort of had it painted, it fully hadn't been done. And somebody reached out and said, I think March 2014, they said, for Women's Day, we want to do something. We want to do blood testing for 100 people. Can we do it? And we said, well, we can do it. And this was like on a charity basis. We said, okay, this is a great place for us to start, where people sort of hear about us and people come in and we're doing something good. So we had our technicians, we had the machines going and everything, and the building wasn't done. It was like we covered it up with the shamiana walls. We borrowed some potted plants from the neighbors and made it look neat, and had people come in and start taking the blood. So I'll never forget that day because we were testing 100 samples. In my excitement, I forgot to order food for all the technicians. And by 2 o'clock, they were like, "Madam, we're hungry." I said, "I'm so sorry. For me, it's not work. For me, it's something else.
Yeah.
But for
Yeah.
my team, it was work, and they needed a lunch break. And
Right.
I will always be disappointed in me for not taking care of them that first day. So that was my first lesson and experience in starting that lab. That was the first day. And then so we sent out, and then after that camp, we had boards. We would put up ads, flyers, and all of that, and nobody would come. We'd have a front office person. We'd have our testing samples. We'd have a blood drawing person. Nobody would come. Be zero billing. One person came for a sugar test. We remember that. There'd be one people. There'd be weeks where there'll be two people coming throughout the week. So there'll be nothing. We'll just be sitting and sitting and sitting. And eventually, of course, we also meet doctors. So my husband and I, we would go meet doctors. They'd be like, "Why are you guys coming? Where's your marketing person?" We're like, we didn't know we needed a marketing person. So we hired a marketing person who would go meet the doctors. And slowly, that's how it started. I remember being very upset that the hand towels were hung very differently than how I would like it. So I remember telling that housekeeping lady, "Illama, you hang it this way so people can wipe. If it's very short, they can't wipe." They're like, "You have too many rules." I said, "Well, you learn so much and you bring so much with you." And those were the initial days. Now it's all hung properly if you want to come and see.
Yeah. The amazing part is what you started off this conversation on, which is that it surprises you that something which is so vital, anybody, the barriers to entry are practically nil. The other problem which you have is that you cannot make out which lab is better than the other one. So let's say, because there's no way for you to assess. You
Yeah.
go in and then you get a test done. You assume that the test is being properly done. And then when you go to a doctor and then he reads out the report, I mean, it seems to work. Now, it's only if a massive mistake is committed that that particular lab is held accountable.
Yes.
So, how do you actually get over that initial bit? Or, like you said, you just have to sail through this whole thing? And then, is there a way in which you can figure that out? Do we have standards now?
Oh, so lovely question. And I think more people should be aware of this because people keep comparing in the lab, the sugar test is only so much. Why is it so much in the other lab? Because every time we run a set of samples, the machine is calibrated. So
Right.
that's, for me, as a person running the lab, that's a cost. Every calibration tells me whether the machine is giving me the correct value or at least the correct range. And I have to do a lower limit calibration and an upper limit calibration. So making sure that I have to track these calibrated values over time to see if there is any variation in that. Very few or only very well run labs keep track of these data. There are labs that are run by somebody who just wants to run a sample. There is a machine, you just put your sample, it will give you the value. There's no calibration done. So how do you know the machine is doing well? And has the machine been doing consistently well over the last 6 months? How do you know all that? So the importance of all this, the need and ability to track all this, honestly came from the PhD, which taught us how important tracking good data is.
Okay.
And yes, there are some mistakes. Every lab makes them. There is no lab in the world that hasn't made a mistake. Every lab makes them. How you handle it is the question. For example, one of the key tests that a lab cannot go wrong with is blood grouping because it doesn't change throughout the life. I can
Right.
argue with you regarding anything else. Your sugar level, your cholesterol level. People have come to us and said, I took this sugar in the morning in this lab, came 2 hours later, it's a different value here. And they're like, how did you come from that lab? Did you eat anything in the middle? All these variabilities can always be explained. But a blood group, you cannot explain. And when you talk about how do we deal with these challenges, so we have redundancies to make sure a blood group is verified twice by 2 people. So we make sure that only we are very confident about the reports we release. One of the
Okay.
interesting stories that we have about challenges is it was a Sunday, and it was around Christmas, and my children and I, we were out somewhere, and I get a call from the lab, and they said, ma'am, we have a problem here. We also do semen analysis, which is we take the semen sample from the male and then analyze for sperm count. This person is given a semen sample, but it is not a semen sample. We think it is phlegm. We are not sure what it is.
Whoa.
Okay. So we call the referring doctor, because it is a problem, we call the referring doctor and say, doctor, the patient has given us a wrong sample. This is not semen. We know from experience that this is not semen. And the doctor says, oh, that's fine. Just give a zero sperm count report. Now, that will land me in legal trouble because you cannot have zero sperm count and my report is legally binding. Let's say this, so we eventually found out that this person was trying to get out of a paternity suit saying he was having zero sperm count. But this was later. So that day, what do we do? And the doctor's like, it's fine, just give zero. Because I don't know. The doctor is like, if you don't have, just give zero. Again, she was saying what she can say. The patient is like, this is my sample, you have to give me a report. So finally we talk to each other. What do we do? How do we analyze how do we handle this report? So that patient was like, I cannot give you a fresh sample. And it was getting a little bit uncomfortable in the lab. And so we said, okay, let's say for every field of semen analysis, we simply say not applicable, not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. In the notes, let us mention sample does not appear to be semen. Please provide fresh sample.
Wow.
So really taught us a lot about people, humans as such, for what we need to be wary about.
Yeah. And it's also a real sort of insight into the range of things that people will ultimately use tests for. We believe that
Yeah,
it will be detection and analysis, but
yeah,
here it was very clearly being used for a completely different purpose, and he didn't want to reveal what the purpose was, obviously. And he
yeah,
knew that the only way to ensure this was not to provide the sample, which is
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Incredible. So in terms of hiring people, you talked of the lady who had to. So, what are the career options available in clinical diagnostics? What is it that people can get into? What are the options they have? And what is the career path?
So there are various levels in which you can enter into a diagnostic lab. One is called a DMLT, Diploma in Medical Lab Technology. I think it's a 1 year course, or it can be a 2 year course. You can do this after class 10. Now, some of the best technicians that I've had have had this background. Cannot string a sentence in English together, but will look at a sample and say, Madam, this is not okay. I cannot test this sample. They will draw blood in the most pain-free manner. In terms of career growth in a diagnostic lab, you will not have much because you will always be the person that collects the sample and hands it over. The next stage would be to have a BSc microbiology or a BSc biochemistry and a DMLT. And
Okay.
that sort of gives you a little bit of background on a little bit of quality control, why you're doing those tests, what is the sample that is being detected, and all. You can draw blood and do the testing. So let's say you have a master's. A master's means, let's say a master's in biochemistry or a master's in microbiology and a DMLT. You're allowed to be an authorized signatory, meaning you can sign off the report saying this is fine, this has been done well. So in India, however, we have a situation where there is something called NABL, National Accreditation Board for Laboratories. That says you have to have a pathologist as the authorized signatory. Now, there is a sort of should we say, a disagreement or a discussion going on whether PhDs are allowed to be authorized signatories or not.
Okay.
As a person with a PhD, I will say, yes, we should be authorized to be signatories. But there is another group that says, no, we only need pathologists who are signatories. Now, this is only if you want your lab to have NABL. You can run a lab very well without any accreditation, without any oversight from anybody. And that also works. So there is no licensing that you need to have to run a diagnostic center in all of India, except I think Himachal Pradesh and one other state. Anybody can start a lab.
Okay. That's that's amazing, actually. So, in the range of tests that you do, what are the things which have come in of late, and are you seeing that whole base expand? And what exactly is happening in the career lab front? Have you seen that people are more amenable to change, or how does it work?
In terms, amenable to change in terms of?
In terms of, the earlier thing used to be that you went to a doctor and the number of tests that you had to take was minimal, let's say 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Today, it's almost as if there's a whole range of tests which are prescribed, and sometimes the list of, even I've seen the difference between what tests used to be 30 years ago and what they are today. The earlier thing used to fit on one small sheet of paper. And
Yeah.
now it's like reams of paper. It's like a report, almost like it goes into details. And I suppose, as far as people are concerned, they don't have much of a choice. But in terms of how you see it, do you think all of this is necessary at all times, or do you think that we are relying on tests to do everything today?
So the multiple aspects to this. Earlier, the number of parameters we could detect itself was very low.
Oh, okay.
And now the number of parameters that we can detect is much higher, which means it gives a better picture of your overall health. Now, you can tell, looking at certain blood reports, you can tell whether a person has a bacterial infection or a viral infection. You can tell whether this person has had alcohol the previous night or not. You can tell all these things. So even if you are lying, your blood report will give away the truth. There are enough people that will, for example, one of the simplest tests, which my cousin's grandmother She passed now about 15 years now. Before that, for the longest time, she was diabetic. 1 week before her sugar test, she was the strictest person on earth. Will follow a diet, everything, and the doctor will be like, excellent, your sugar is very good, go. She'll go back to eating her Mysore pak. The identification of this one simple test, HbA1c, the glycosylated hemoglobin test, tells you if you've been on your diet plan for 3 months or not. So it helps. So the identification of some of these blood tests have told us whether patients are compliant or not. Your blood report does not lie. So all these things have honestly, I feel, helped doctors understand and diagnose their patients better.
Okay. Okay. I think that's a very fair assessment, especially, and I'm sure that people who've been cheating on their tests on this particular thing, if they watch the segment, they'll know you can run, but you cannot hide.
You can't hide, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
Which is fascinating. So, what are some of the other things that clinical tests throw up in terms of? You say that you can make out if the person has had alcohol, if they've binged on sugar, all of those
Yeah.
things. What are the other tests that you think have become very important to understanding people's attitudes and how they function?
One of the I'll tell you about my favorite test is always a pregnancy test. They'll wait in the
Okay.
lobby of our. For me, this is very personal. They'll wait in the lobby of our lab to find out if they're pregnant, if they confirm pregnant or not. And to me, that's a moment of privilege because we are part of their journey in something very, very, very significant and joyful. We've also seen where people come from far away for taking HIV tests, and we see them see the report and then sit there and cry. We have counselors on hand, but what do? They will simply say, "ஒரு நாள் தப்பு பண்ணிட்டேன்." Maybe one day not, but it's life changing. So you learn a lot about what people like, what people don't, not what makes people tick, what people's greatest joys are, what people's regrets are, just by looking at a sheet of paper. So people always question lab, especially because we analyze urine and feces, and everybody will diss it until they really need it. We can
Yes.
tell you with your urine sample whether you're pregnant or not. How is that dirty or disgusting? We can tell you if you have IBS or not looking at your stool sample. You can get the medication from there. Whether your diagnostic plan is based on the poop that we analyze. So there is in terms of what else it has thrown up, I'll only share about our journey here. We once had a sample where there was a newborn, maybe 14, 15 days old, had the worst urinary tract infection, was not resolving. This is a 14-day-old child. Okay, this is just fresh, just born child. And I remember the number of us who were up trying to figure out what antibiotics would work, calling multiple people and going back and forth, and then getting the report and then telling the doctor prescribing the antibiotic. We never saw the child. But we play this role in the background where we can make such a significant. The child was fine. We found out later. So all these things sort of make us understand what an integral part of healthcare that we provide.
Okay. Fabulous. So I'll just take that break. I'm talking to Dr. Pavithra Venkatagopalan, and she spoke of how the early journey of starting a clinical diagnostic lab in India is tough, difficult, because how do you build trust? Because that is the essential part. How do you build a business? How do you get people to notice who you are? And she spoke of how people just trickled in almost one or two a week in the early days. So it must have taken a lot of strength to go through that phase and finally reach a point now where the lab does a lot more work on a daily basis. the kind of people she recruits, what are the qualities that they're looking for, what is the career track, and what are some of the most heartrending as well as triumphant stories. For example, telling people uh, a lady that she's pregnant. And what I'm struck by is how she sees this from so many perspectives. I tried to tell her that the range of tests has increased, but she simply countered me by saying the number of parameters we can check are so in a sense, a lab has literally become like a detection area which tells you so much more. If you like what we've been listening to, please share, subscribe, and let more people know about this career. And in the final segment, I'll be talking to Dr. Pavithra about where she plans to go from here and what does she see are the milestones ahead. So you've been running Care Health for roughly about 10 years now, or what
Yeah,
is the
little,
number?
little
Yeah,
less of 10 years
yeah,
now. Yeah.
yeah. So what do you see as the horizon and what are the things that you would like to do going forward?
Uh, Before I talk about going forward, I should tell you, I should go back a little bit. When we started
Okay.
this lab, this was when there was a California-based diagnostics company called Theranos, started by
Yes.
this lady,
Oh,
Elizabeth
yeah. That
something.
lady is now in prison. That amazing story. She said with
Yeah, it
one
is.
drop of blood, you can, yeah. That's a
Yes.
famous
So
case.
when
Yes.
we started this lab, everybody was like, "Oh, you're going to be the next Theranos," and all of that, and all of that. And now I'm so grateful we are not. We are still here, liquid. We are still functioning. No, nobody's in jail. So we are currently in this situation where everything is about valuation.
Right.
And we look at big numbers. We're like 100 million, 1 billion. I don't know what that means. But to be firm in your belief that you are doing something right and your business, what is the business? You have to put in money, you provide a service or a product, you make money to pay whatever is needed, possibly grow. Per that basis, our business model is solid. But
Right.
to ignore the noise of, but how many centers do you have? Do you have centers in every pin code? Do you have all this? It took a long time for us because we're also young. We were also young, I suppose. Uh, it took us a long time to cut out that noise and come back to the roots saying, yeah, we're doing fine here. Not every business is going to explode into this. And I keep, we keep talking, we talked up to a few doctors. They were very clear. They're like, that's no, those $1 billion is not value, that's inflation. Nobody knows what that means. Is anybody taking $1 billion home? No. Are you taking your profits home? Yes, then your business works.
Yeah.
So to cut out that noise was very important. And even now we keep looking at aggregates, people that aggregate lab technicians. They don't really test samples, they aggregate lab technicians. And then you can book this person, they will come collect, take your sample, go test it and give the report back. We've seen those models come and fail. We've seen models where there's very high-tech setup where you go in and there is a computer where you log in and go. We've seen that come in and fail. Our firm belief is this. When you walk into a lab, I'm not trying to sell you anything. You're not coming in a happy frame of mind. You're not coming into Sarvana stores or whatever stores you want to buy something with joy. I'm here to solve your problem. Am I doing that effectively? Am I doing that sincerely? So when we came down to these basics, we changed our approach. Before COVID, actually, we opened up a couple of centers in the city. And what happened was COVID came, nobody was leaving the house. And
Right.
everybody wanted testing done in their houses. So we said, why are we paying overheads? So we're not the first ones to do this, and we certainly won't be the last. But I cannot explain this other than the fact that we've stuck to our principles of being sincere and effective. We do sample collection in people's homes throughout the city. Literally from Red Hills to Gudvancheri, we do sample collections.
Right.
Because the comfort that we offer of people being in their own home. See, most blood samples you take it when you're hungry. Do you really want to get dressed, go somewhere and go give the sample? And do you want to use the bathroom in another place, or would you like to use the restroom in your own house?
Very true.
So the ease that we offer makes the difference in why people reach out to us. Nowadays, most labs have people that have someone that comes home and does it. In fact, what my husband and I do is we never test samples in our lab. We will call a new lab that's come and say, come and take the sample. We will see how that person brings in, how that person greets you, what that person is wearing, how that person collects your sample, whether they use a syringe or that other vacuum tube they collect, how they dispose of the waste. So to help ourselves get better. Because initially our technician would hand over the garbage to the patient's houses to throw them. We realized we didn't like doing it. We're like, no, you will take a trash bag and you will take it back and then dispose it off in the lab. So all of these things sort of told us that we are going in the right direction. And now, because we're based in Cropet, we work with a lot of clinics and hospitals in that area.
Right.
We also have to be quick. We can't take 1 hour to transport it and go. So we work in that area where our person will take the sample, bring it to our lab, test it, and give the report back in a matter of couple of hours. So if you look at growth, are we glamorously having hoardings everywhere? No. Are we effective in what we're doing and making a profit? Yes. And we tried social media marketing and all of that, but honestly, what works is word of mouth.
And what
So
you just mentioned is so true. And I looked at people coming home and taking a test as merely convenience. But when you added those two things, which is that you go in a frame of mind when you're hungry, and would you like to give a sample when you are in the comfort of your own home, makes such a huge difference to how you perceive the simple act of collecting a sample. And what I love is that you've broken this down into a set of processes and evaluating yourself by seeing how others do it and seeing if there's something to learn or if there's something to drop. You know, maybe I shouldn't be following that particular thing. And I think you've fundamentally defined growth in a very, very different way. If only people stuck to these things, which is that the basics. And of course, the largest number of doctors who are going to prescribe will come from close by because patients do want their tests to be done more quickly. But suppose there was a point when you needed to add on another lab and you were not present, or do you think that this lab itself can grow from wherever it is to meet the needs of a much larger, wider group? Or at some point, do you think that you will require to add more branches?
this is something that I go back to. The analogy that I have is very women would relate to it more than men, because each of us go to the beauty parlor to get our eyebrows done. There is a parlor in every street. Why do
Right.
you go to Lakshmi in that parlor to get your eyebrows done? Because of comfort. Blood
Yes.
drawing is an extremely personal, invasive process.
Right.
It is a very people centric model of operation. If I have one technician, I cannot immediately replace that technician with another X or Y, simply because I need to make sure my client is comfortable allowing them into their house. Sometimes you have to go to someone's bedroom and draw blood sample. If my technician is not well dressed, they might not want him in their bedroom.
Very true.
So, so I don't believe that I can spring this model without intense training into a big springboard into a much larger setup. This is my
But I think
opinion.
it's a very well considered opinion because there are so many moving parts to it. It's not just about you started from calibration, you started from the range of tests, you start from how a technician or a lab technician is dressed. When you go down to that level of detail, I begin to understand things that I never considered about being in a career in diagnostics at all. I mean, these are the small but very significant aspects of what can scale and what cannot scale. Because I think all of us have had this experience where even in a franchise, you go to a hotel which you like, which is very close by, and then you go to another place and somehow it doesn't seem to have the same feel and flavor for
Yeah.
whatever reason. But what are the long-term things that you are interested in, or do you think that what you're doing will bring about its own set of you'll realize the goals that you're seeking to achieve, or do you think that there are things that you want to add on in due course?
This is something that my husband and I we keep talking about regularly. We want to have our own DMLT college, including soft skill training.
Okay.
Because the boys and girls that come technically very solid, including soft skill training, we want to start a college, but we will see. That is
Okay.
something that I want to do.
That's a wonderful
But
place to start, because that's where uh, the next generation of technicians are going to come from, and they will always be required. This is not something
yeah,
that can be, you know, you can't
yeah,
bring AI into it and then say I'll draw blood. It's not
yeah.
possible. So it's a yeah. So it's an amazing
Interestingly,
thing to do.
uh, a
Hmm.
lot of the technicians are hired to hospitals in the Middle East and paid very well.
Okay. Okay.
And I
Okay.
found it very fascinating because I would see my technicians leave. I'm like, "Enga poranga ivanga?" Because they never tell you the truth of why they're leaving. So you sort of figure out that they're all going to the Middle East, and eventually after a few years they'll reach out saying, "We were here, we did this," and I'm like, I didn't know this was an option, and it is a wonderful
Okay.
option because you are an important cog in the wheel. You're well taken care of. You're well respected. So even if those technicians that hopefully study in my college don't work with me, they have other opportunities that they can pursue.
Okay. And that's really a solid career option, because the need to test is never going to go away. If anything,
Yes.
the number of parameters are only going to increase, and stuff like that. What is your take on, I know this is tangential, on how so many devices today have become, are measuring everything from the heartbeat to blood pressure to, do you think that puts people in a good frame of mind or a bad frame of mind?
Okay. Uh, the data is just data. The frame of mind is all you. If you are a person prone to anxiety, maybe
Okay.
put the device away. Maybe put it away. Like
Okay.
I am
Okay.
prone to overthinking things. Oh my God, my heart rate went to 140 yesterday doing. I'm like, wait. So now I only track my steps. I still
Okay.
like data because you can't take the nerd out of me. I still like data. But it took a while to figure out what data was essential and what was not for
Okay.
my own direction. There are some people for whom that oxygen level is important. For some people, the blood pressure reading is important. If you have high blood pressure and you're going to be anxious and you're going to be checking your watch all the time, you're only shooting yourself in the foot.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think uh, you kind of, you have a wonderful way of cutting through to what is important. And you simply dissected what I told you and then said, "Nothing- the data is not wrong, it's your mindset which is the problem." So, agreed, 100% agreed. So, in terms of, okay, the DLMT college is one of the things that you're looking at. So, who do you think is best suited for a career in this field? What is the kind of mindset that you need to have?
This is very interesting. If you are a very good lab technician, is they're always calm or to the point of being stoic because you can never tell which patient will scream, which patient will be quiet. Some patients will faint, and that just happens. You have to be able to handle all of that. Some of it comes from experience, some of it comes from an innate confidence in what you're. Remember, you need to be very confident to poke a needle in someone's arm.
Right.
So you get that training and come, and so you have, so especially when you draw blood for children. Infants are okay. When you draw blood for children, you are dealing with a child that is scared. You're dealing with a parent that is even more scared.
Yeah.
When my child needs a blood draw, I don't go around because I make the situation worse.
Okay.
So you need somebody who's confident, who knows what they're doing, and doesn't let the noise around them affect them from doing their job. Because it's not just drawing the blood; it's what you do after the drawing the blood that also matters. If you notice, they will take out the needle, put the blood into a tube, and then what if they put the blood into the tube without removing the needle? That sample is wasted. So they have to keep in mind all the steps that they need to do in spite of all the chaos and crying that happens around you. And there are multiple places to draw blood from in your arm. You should be able to tell, this all comes with experience, of course. You should be able to tell which vein will be the best suited for this person. So it comes from you needing to be confident, you being adaptable, and you learning from your own experience.
Okay. This is the technicians in the field. What about the people who work in the lab itself? As far as they go, what are the things that they have to look at?
Yeah, this is where they have their degree that plays a role. These are the people that look at the quality control, they check if the equipment is working, they check whether they can come back and say, listen, this blood, they've not collected the sample. They have to see the sample and verify whether it is suitable for testing or not. Sometimes samples are not suitable for testing. So they are the ones that they have to have an eagle eye, an eye for detail, to make sure that the analysis that they're doing on the samples is accurate. So they track the minutiae of whether the machines work properly, whether the quality control is happening properly. They sometimes have to take a call saying, I cannot run this test today because this machine, I'm not happy with the report. I have to send the report out by that evening. But you still have to take a call and say, hey, I need to do this before I send this out. I will not send that report out having any doubt in my mind. So that level of, again, confidence, attention to detail is important when you are working in the lab, and being systematic. Some of these reports, machines are directly connected to the computer. So it will directly populate under your name. But some you have to write down. Are you writing it down correctly? Are you typing it in correctly? So this attention to detail is very, very important.
Great. It's been wonderful talking to you, Dr. Pavithra. I mean,
Thank you.
there is so much that you have explained and in marvelous detail and focused on all the small things that people may not even consider as important. And you've shown how important they are. So thank you for spending the time. And it's been wonderful having you on the show.
Thank you so much, Venu. It's been a pleasure being here talking to you today.
Okay. Here's wishing you the very best for the future, and may Care Health continue to provide accurate and timely diagnostics to a whole lot of people who are looking for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.